So I'd love to kind of just dive in and kick things off with laying a really nice solid foundation about self-love and what self-love is, because I think that there's a lot of chatter about self-love on the internet. We got all these like cute hokey like quotes and these sorts of things, and how do we care for ourselves? And I love the fact that this word that I feel was really tied up with like luxurious baths and going to the spa and those sorts of things has actually been grounded and come into a more, a space that is more inclusive and more I'm missing my word. Just something that anyone can do at any point in time throughout their day. You don't need to go and spend all this money. And but I still think like our definitions of what self-care are really vary. And I think that that's actually an okay thing. I think it's a really beautiful thing. So I'd love for you to just kind of share with us like your definition of self-care.
Hmm. Okay, let me sit with that for a moment. Self-love and self-trust and our intuition for me are all kind of like interwoven. Same with confidence. That all kind of comes through when I think of self-love. Trust, trust in our intuition, trust in our gut, trust in our ability to move forward in life come through. And it really is like a dance with our own heart. Our heart is the receiver of our soul's message. And our hearts are in constant dialogue with us. Our deepest part of our energetic heart is always communicating with us what is best for us, what to avoid, what's a yes and what's a no. And the more we can free ourselves from distractions and connect into the space of our energetic heart and get clear on navigating and taking action on what our heart is most desiring in that moment, that strengthens our self love. And yeah, it's a beautiful place to be. So for me, self love is being in full, unconditional trust with the messages that we're receiving from the heart. So that is what self love is for me now.
That's a beautiful definition. I love that. We just
Mm-hmm.
in the course that we just wrapped or that I just wrapped up an Akashic journey with the body. So much of what was channeled through in that course was very much about the heart, about all the different elements, the mechanisms, and how things work, and how those lines of communication come through, and how they're connected. And even the August Akashic forecast, so much about August is about connecting with our heart and really learning how to live from our heart space versus our mental space. Because, of course, the mental space, that when the mind is driving the bus, it's very dangerous on so many different
Mm-hmm.
levels. And so I love that you paired it together with the intuition, and because absolutely the heart is the receiver of, the soul's transmissions that are coming through. And I believe that when we can live from our heart space, it makes everything a lot easier to accept about ourselves and to come into, maybe a place of forgiveness or release or whatever the case it may be. Where do you see acceptance, like being able to accept parts of ourselves in the midst of that self-love? Like, how does that connect?
Mm. These are all really great questions. feel like we'd be doing a lot of like talking to process. Yeah, I feel like it connects through forgiveness. Like that's what's coming through the strongest is in order to accept ourselves and love ourselves fully, we need to forgive. We need to forgive ourselves for what we've inherited through our families. We need to forgive ourselves for the conditioning of our upbringing. We need to forgive ourselves for experiencing the traumas that we've gone through. We need to forgive ourselves for heartbreaks that we've experienced. And for me, it all comes back to once we're able to forgive those deepest, darkest, most shameful, most guilt ridden aspects of ourselves, we can then fully show up in love and in acceptance.
Yeah, I think I mean, it's such a process, right? Like being able to come into, at least for me, so much of the process is and in the midst of working with my clients, um, first coming into that place of awareness in regards to, oh, okay, I have this thought about this thing, like I got some big thighs, that might be my, oh, wow, I really judge, the size of my thighs. And then what am I going to do about that? How am I going to work with that? How am I going to come into a space of acceptance around that? Like instead of just being like, okay, I think I've got big thighs and I don't like them and I want them to be this shape and I want them to look like this. And so like, okay, so maybe I'm going to stop eating here. I'm going to work out really hard here. I'm going to, you know what I mean? How do you kind of either with yourself or with your clients, how are you able to shift more into that space of acceptance from a, a higher level, a deeper level, I guess, of that thing that maybe we don't like about ourselves, so that we can begin shifting it in more of an internal way than going to those like sort of like 3D solutions.
Mm-hmm.
Is that making sense?
Yes. Immediately what comes to mind is like I keep on getting this Instagram ad for this lotion that's like filled with I don't even know what they are, just long words of ingredients of weird things. And I'm like, what is this? And it's like, cover up your cellulite and just use
Oh
this
yeah.
lotion. Like, you don't have to work out. Stop working out. I'm like, stop telling me this. Like, I'm always like, no. Like, the moment I see the ad, I like swipe and I actively say no. Like, I am not receiving this. But the big thighs thing, let's go back to that because I think that's a great example and so tactile of a way to kind of enter this. um, if a client were to come to me and say like, okay, like I'm feeling really like, you know, insecure about my thighs and I want to have a loving relationship with my body, we have to start at where that came from. Who told you that your thighs were big and unlovable? So let's start there. We have to go all the way back to the first memory of when you were told that your thighs weren't big. And maybe you weren't told that by anyone. Maybe you were watching a movie and Jennifer Aniston in the movie said, "Oh my God, my fat thighs." And you're looking at her legs and they're like really tiny and you're comparing yourself to her and thinking, whoa, like if she thinks her thighs are big, then like, wow, mine are massive. And I have to do something about this because like she can't get the boyfriend in the movie. And it's because her thighs are fat and her thighs are significantly smaller than mine. So that creates this um, implant, we can call it, of my thighs are big, therefore I'm unlovable and I need a change. And I can't accept myself for this until I can change that. So we go all the way back, finding that core memory, and then really bringing a lot of compassion to it. Sometimes just recognizing where that came from and having compassion for if it was a parent that said it unconsciously or well intentioned or whatever it might have been, like just kind of understanding where they were at, understanding that, okay, movies, societies, they want us to buy stuff. So there are these ways that even like brilliant, beautiful films are making us see the world from a specific viewpoint. So acknowledging that, okay, that is the story of the movie, like that isn't a reflection of me, but we need to really go back and kind of like a surgeon, like really precisely cut through and pinpoint what isn't ours, what was kind of like implanted into us, and like kind of move that piece out, and then shower that with love and acceptance. So then kind of moving into, I like to use mantras and affirmations. Once that piece has been pulled out, we're going in, or energy work or other modalities that we can throw in here. But the key is to go back, find the core, um, and even just coming to the mantra of like, I fully love and accept myself for who I am and the beautiful thighs that I've been given in this lifetime, and for my ability to walk, for my ability to move forward in life, to travel, to hike, to go on adventures with my beautiful thighs. And then just start to kind of reframe that point of view towards ourselves. But core memories are important. That's what shapes a lot of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been going through a training with the body, and for my own self, my own development and education. And the first really core part of it is so much focused on just how much we absorb in our younger years, and how that fully dictates the rest of our life. And so it can be as something as simple as, like you're saying, like the Jennifer Aniston, like, oh my gosh, she's talking about her thighs. I mean, like, you know what I mean? Um, and so going to the root, I think, is so huge. I know, like, my work within the Akashic Records, that's one of the reasons I love working with them so much, is because anytime we're focused on any topic, like, they don't just say what's going on immediately, they go like right down to the root of it. And sometimes they'll channel through a message that's like 15 minutes long because they're like fully laying the groundwork and talking about all the context and the root of what's going on. And so I think that that's really crucial, because these are such deep rooted, either their beliefs, or they really are, I think, firmly planted in our body. I came across this quote that I wanted to share for this episode, but I just thought this was really cool. Self-compassion is the most potent source of nervous system regulation.
I love that.
It's huge, and I think that that just kind of goes back to like this element of working and trying to cultivate the self-love within ourselves is so important. Um, what are some of the reasons that you think self-love is really important?
For me, self love is becoming um, well resourced. So we need to, and I will just share like a hot tip with y'all. um, it's really important for us to start taking note of what works for us when things don't go the way we want them to go. When we're feeling emotions that we don't really do well in, or we want to move through them a little bit smoother or quicker, instead of like wallowing in sadness or in grief. And the best thing to do is to make a list of things that work for you. Um, and do this like when you're in a good state. It makes it a lot easier, obviously, but maybe even go through like lists of emotions that you felt. So like kind of key ones: sadness, grief, um, anger, even joy and bliss, like things like that. Like sometimes we forget when we're in those heightened states or those higher vibrational states that we can still cultivate those things. And often it's linked to experiences or things that we have done to get there, So reminding ourselves of like, oh, remember when I was feeling like super joyful? Like, what was it that brought me there? For sadness, um, think about things that have worked for you. And again, this is a way of having that smooth dialogue with your heart. So your heart's going to tell you, okay, we're sad because this specific thing happened. Um, I'll give a very specific example for when I was feeling, it was actually kind of like anger and sadness and grief, I think, all at once. Um, I was visiting with my mom, and we have a bit of a challenging relationship. It had gone a lot better, but I went and stayed with her in her home, and she lives in Germany. And being in her space and staying there for a while and just being around her was so triggering or activating, we can say, for my inner child, or not, yeah, my inner teen specifically. And I was just feeling like all this rage, like I felt trapped, and like all of these things were resurfacing, and it took me a while to figure out what it was, probably about like 2 to 3 weeks, trying to just like move with this energy that like came in full force. And the thing that actually like helped me the quickest to move that energy, because for a while I was just letting it like swirl within my being and just being like, what is this, like why is this coming up? I didn't even like fully associate it with my inner teen, or I did, but I didn't know how to free myself of it. It was just like, yeah, swirling within me is the easiest way of describing it. And the thing that moved it the quickest, the I was still feeling, I was like, one day I just felt, I was like, I can't do anything. I'm still feeling this. And I really don't want to feel this anger and rage. Like, I don't want to feel terrible towards my mom. I don't want to blame her for everything like I used to. And, I see who she is as a person and I respect that. But like, why can't I free this? And I just screamed into a pillow and screamed like full force, tried to like get it all out. Um, and then that helped a little bit and things kind of like subsided. I also like booked a session with my therapist and talked to her about it and just had like a neutral person to talk to, which for me helps a lot because our friends and our family know us. So I feel like, and my therapist knows me too, but like kind of a different side of me. Friends and family know us and they have all these things and they love us. So they're going to say stuff that's, they're just going to try and make us feel good. So it's not always like the most helpful in those times, at least for me. So I booked a call with her, talked it out, cried it out with her. That felt really good too. And then like a couple days later, I was just driving in the car with my partner, and I'm like, I'm so sorry, but I have to go back and listen to like these really cheesy songs that I used to listen to when I was a teenager, and just kind of rage out for a moment. And it was just like 5 songs. It was almost as if I was like moving through each year of high school, and um each song that like I don't know, they just like came through. Like I guess spirit was just like, listen to this one next, listen to this one, and I knew all the words still, and I just like sang them in the car on our way to get groceries. And that was the thing, like that, I guess the final piece that just like everything clicked, and then it was like, oh, the feeling's gone now. Yeah, like I can just go back to being me. And I think often we think like self care, self love is sort of like what you mentioned at the beginning, like, okay, we have to take a bubble bath, or we're going to go to a yoga class and, or sit like in a field and meditate, and that's going to like help us. But it's these really like, there are these little things that we can do that we already know help us. And we all have this. And I don't know what yours are. I don't know what anyone else's are who's listening, but you know for yourself what those things are. And it's important to make a list of them. So have this like list handy, like keep it somewhere that you can easily find it when you're in a time of need, when you're feeling super angry. Like have a few things listed for anger, and then you can always go back to it and look at it and be like, oh yeah, I remember that screaming felt really good that one time. Let's try that again. Or, maybe it's going for a run or lifting weights, whatever it might be for you, you'll know. And often it's not, I love yoga meditation. For me, I rarely ever go to those things when I'm feeling all of the stuff. There's other things that work faster and quicker, that I like to do. And yeah, I guess, yeah, resourcing ourselves. Make sure you're well resourced. And if you are like, oh my God, I don't have any of these tools, I wouldn't have thought to scream into a pillow, ask a friend, ask a loved one. It's a great way to open up and be vulnerable and just be like, hey, I listened to this weird podcast with this girl, Susie, and she said that I should have lists of things to do when I'm angry or when I'm sad. Like, what do you do? Like, what helps you move through sadness? And that's a great way to heal collectively as well within our own families and our friendship groups and our communities, to see what other people do and kind of pick and choose and like try them out, when it happens. And you can have a long list, and if you do something you're like, wow, that really wasn't helpful, cross it off and like add something else. And that's what I've been doing, like my whole healing journey is like, okay, I like that, I don't like that, I'm going to try that. Oh, okay, that thing worked, I'm going to try that thing. Okay, that didn't work, I'm not going to do that again. And you just kind of build from there.
Yeah, it's really powerful. I mean, the Akashic records, like that's definitely something I think we talk about on the podcast a lot, is having like creating your own list of things that work for you. It's just so huge because, and especially in these times, I mean, life's always been, it's always ebbed and flowed. There's always been challenging times and great times. It's nothing new, but like with the intensity in which everything is picking up right now and falling apart at the same time around us, in addition to all of the internal work that we're being called into, it's just so important for us to have a better understanding of these things that really work in our life and that can help move the needle. And it is, I mean, like working with anger has for me been one of the most powerful things that I've ever done. I'm someone who feels a lot of rage. I feel a lot of anger, and learning that, learning how to work with anger in a way that worked for me, which was physically getting it out of my body. And I mean, like, I remember my psychotherapist being like, so like you could like angry, right? And I'm like, no, F that. Like that'll just make me more angry. It's not going to work. Like squeezing a towel was one of the suggestions. And I was just like, oh, like I can't handle that.
What
Like,
do you do? I'm curious. What works for you?
so it was great. She was like throwing out all these ideas, and it was just like, no, no, no. And then she was like, so finally, she's like, I have this one client, and she like gets empty Coke liter bottles and beats the crap out of her kitchen counter. And I was like, yes, perfect.
Yeah.
For me, I have to get it out of my body, like I really do. And it's something that I really enjoy. And I usually will like, whether I'm like using a towel and maybe like hitting my bed or something like that, which sounds so violent. And honestly, like the more hand quotations violent I get in the midst of it, especially if I can like be full on screaming like a total mad woman, the release is huge on the other side.
Yes.
I usually collapse in tears. I usually let out so much emotion. I have had my most profound moments with my inner child or my inner teenager in that. Like it is just, it's powerful. And so figuring out, like some people can like angry right, and that works for them, and that's great. That's just not for me. And so I completely agree with you. I'm curious because of course there's this fine line here between working through and trying to bring ourselves back to center, and also like spiritually bypassing, right? Like working too hard to try and keep ourselves in some sort of like middle or make ourselves happy, when maybe sometimes we just have to fall apart and be ugly and awful sometimes. So I'm really curious what your thoughts, like where that line is for you.
So that was like the biggest lesson that I had through that experience with navigating my inner teen that was being activated. because there was so much shame I was putting on myself. It was like, okay, you consider yourself this holistic mental health supporter and you can't even support yourself. Like all of the negative self-talk flowed through. And then it was like, you're leading workshops on negative self-talk and you're beating yourself up right now. It was so funny. Like in hindsight, of course, not at the time. It was really annoying at the time. But all of that was coming through, and the self-hate and just being like, I shouldn't be feeling this way. Like, why am I feeling this way? Like, this is bad. This isn't good. Like, you need to like figure this out and figure it out fast. And I was like really hard on myself. And again, it took me about probably total like an entire month to move this energy. And I'm quite sensitive. So I feel like when something feels off, it's highlighted for me. A lot of people just ignore it and just won't do anything with it and just continue on life, which I think has more detrimental effects, maybe. I don't know. But probably, I'm going to say. And for me, it just is like the spotlight is on the thing and it's like eradicate, like get rid of this feeling, or like we have to sort this and figure it out. And yeah, sorry, what was the question?
Yeah. So, kind of that line between, just really, because like it's so important to me to allow myself to feel my emotions and to not just
Mm-hmm.
make myself into a pretty little package. And so there is that fine line of allowing ourselves to feel without stepping into, that. Let me back up. So I should say, I think it's really important for us to feel our emotions and yet being able to work with these things. And so, where is that fine line between working with these things and spiritual bypassing? Like just being
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, well, no, I just need to get it together. I just need to be happy. I need to just be nice, or I need to, you know what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Yeah. So I could have easily, like, in that state, just kept presenting or um, ignoring it, essentially. I think that's what spiritual bypassing is. It's ignoring what needs to move through us, and pushing it down. And it's challenging. I feel like there's a lot of people, especially within our community. I think this is why I love you so much, because you're so real and authentic. And when you're going through it, you admit that, and it's the truth. Um, and this is actually just a reminder for me to like share more of the like struggles sometimes, because obviously social media ends up being this highlight reel, and it's hard for others to know like what is happening on the backside. For me, I just step away when I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna take a break and not be out in the world while I'm processing. um, but yeah, it is so important, and it is a fine line. I think we want to progress and not let our burdens continue to follow us, but the only way to progress is to go through, and like you said, let yourself fall apart completely. And that is going to be the thing that releases it, and that's what released that sensation and feeling and activation that happened. I also did a lot of forgiveness practices, for my relationship with my mother. And, I fully understand where she's at, from her life experiences and, you know, her raising me and all those things. And I have so much love and forgiveness for her now. But when I was first activated, it was like, oh my God, I need to like break up with my mom. I need to, I was like listening to podcasts about like ending this relationship, which now I'm like, oh God, like that was extreme. But I had to move through that. I had to kind of explore all of it and scream through all of it, like rage sing through all of it. And yeah, just let myself feel into those things. It's so important. And we don't want to do that because we want to present like we're great, especially when you're a business owner and stuff. You're like, people aren't going to take me, people aren't going to think I'm legitimate if I'm, you know, raging and like smashing my bed with my fist because I'm so angry at this thing that happened. Um, but we are all human. And I think the more we can have conversations like these, the more we can share these sorts of experiences, the more that we can see, like, oh, yeah, like that is the way through. Otherwise, we are spiritual bypassing, and that is much more detrimental to our health. And that's how diseases form, how, um, mental disruptions happen, and bigger bangs, we could call them, in life.
Yeah, I think it's huge. And I love that you allowed yourself. I mean, I think it's to listen to those podcasts and to go there and be like, okay, so maybe I need to break up with my mom. Like, I think it's so important for us to try and not judge that process, especially when we are moving through huge triggers, emotions, whatever. I mean, family is a big one. There's so much there. And I know for myself that for the longest time, because I've been like in and out of therapy since I was a kid. Um, my parents got divorced when I was like 10. My dad started taking us to therapy, and I was just like, a whole hour to talk about me, like, let's do it. I loved it.
Mm-hmm.
But I always I had an issue with my therapist because they weren't helping me to see, because I could always understand why my parents did what they did. I could always logically be like, like I wasn't ever someone who like blamed my parents for who I am or my situations or even all the ways they hurt me. Like I could logically understand why it happened. But it wasn't until I started working with my psychotherapist back in 2020 and really worked with her a long time about, and she helped me to see that intellectual understanding is so different from what's happened in our emotional body, and that's really
Mm-hmm.
where the work is. It's not in like, can I make sense of why my parent was a jerk? Like your parent legitimately was doing the best they could at the time. They, like there's that doesn't help us grow and evolve and heal. Like, and for me, I've had to go through my own periods of like fully disconnecting from my parents and or stepping away. That's part of the process. I just think it's great that you allowed yourself that, because it is so important. um so I'm really curious, one of the things I really wanted to talk with you about was like loving ourselves in these really hard times, and I feel like we've kind of been talking about that a bit. um Even having those tools that kind of help us get back to center. But like I know that you have been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. It's bipolar disorder, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I, like, for myself as well, like we were kind of talking before we started recording, but learning how to love myself and these very, because ADHD for me presents, I can really go through periods of anxiety and depression and really have ups and downs. And my mental process, I like to say it's like a 6-lane highway, like 24/7. It's a lot. And so it can be really difficult for me to connect with my self-love when I go through these really low periods and or I go through these hard times where maybe my behavior has affected somebody else, and or hurt someone else, or I've done something and fallen, like, really screwed something up. Um, but I'd love to hear how you, in the midst of, working with your own mental disorder, have been able to find that love for yourself in the process.
Mm-hmm. It was like a big process of recultivating self-love. I felt like before I had my experiences with mania that led me then to hospitalization. It was all very confusing of a time. Before that, I had really strong self-love, as a child and as a teen, and and then that experience actually like kind of shattered that for me, because I was like, whoa, like I can't trust myself. I can't trust my own mind. I can't, what if that happens again? Like, I don't know what's going to like make that happen again. Cause, when you're diagnosed, you're not given all of these tools to support you to avoid being in hospital again. So through my healing journey after a hospitalization and being diagnosed, I had to rebuild, like from the ground up, my self love. And it started bit by bit. Um, but through, and like through that healing journey, there was dips of like hard times, we can call it, things that came up, mistakes that were made. And it was really hard because there would be a lot of negative self-talk. But each time I kind of went like dipped down, I guess is the easiest way to describe it, like had those low moments in life, um, I was always able to, it's so difficult for me to like articulate with words what this experience is like. But for whatever reason, I was always able to like kind of like crawl back out of that hole that I like found myself in. And through that experience of like, okay, another mistake or another thing happening that's throwing me off, every time I like crawled out of that hole, that it is what created um, this unshakable self love that I have today. It was in those moments of, it was like building, it was like building this armor, um, but like soft, squishy, lovey armor of protection for my heart, but also like fluid and open. And it was those moments of, okay, I'm in the hole again. Like, how can I get out faster or swiftly? And every time, and they could have been different experiences that got me into that like hole. But every time I climbed through, I learned a different way to climb up. And it was in the climbing that the self love was formed. So I guess to try and put that succinctly, it was in the building moments of getting myself out that created that. And, a new mantra for me is I can grow, learn, and expand with ease. Because I used to always tell myself this, that I learned the hard way. And I did. And that's what happened. And now I'm in a space of learning and growing with ease where um, that self love has been cultivated, that I am well resourced, and that now I have the ability to expand. It can be quite difficult, and we all have different experiences with how to love ourselves in those lows. But going back to that month of navigating what was coming up for my inner teen, the easiest way to say this is that it was just there. The self-love didn't go anywhere, even though I was angry and like screaming into a pillow and talking to my therapist, my partner, my friends, and trying to put the pieces together. The self-love never left, even when I was feeling shitty. It was just the foundation. It wasn't shattering anymore like it did in the past. It was just there, solid and strong. And I think for me, a big piece of my self-love was my connection to source. That is something that I didn't have prior to my mania. And I feel like that was why that happened to me. I am reframing my experience of mania and um, being diagnosed as a spiritual emergency. It wasn't mania, it was a spiritual emergency. It was spirit cracking me open, a bit violently, cracking my heart open, shattering it into a million pieces, and then being like, okay, like now that you know where we are and how we can exist in multiple dimensions, in multiple ways, through multiple people, you have to figure this out and put the pieces together, or else you're going to stay in this space of chaos and disorganization and delusion. And I am grateful for that experience, even though it was very challenging. But I, again, needed to learn the hard way. I was nihilistic as a teen and didn't believe in anything and just thought nothing mattered and just kept on going through life like that. And then that experience happened and it woke me up. I had a lot of insight into different fields of energy, both beautiful and horrific and dark, and also was able to see the interwoven fabric of the world that we live in. Again, both the good and the bad side. And that, that was such a beautiful experience. And I'm so grateful for it. But that piece of soul from the mind, body, soul trinity, I needed that puzzle piece was missing. And once that locked in, and again, it came through those experiences, there were still some lows that happened after being diagnosed and the building myself back up over and over again. And always seeing that like soul and spirit was always communicating with me and trying to get through. I just wasn't listening. And again, like spirit moving through the soul, sending and being received by the heart, sending messages to the heart and being received by the heart. Once I started to connect with that, like everything just like exploded. And that's where like, well, not exploded, I guess like blasted off. And I think that's where like, that's how I understand quantum leaping, because that was the experience I had. It was just like, oh, puzzle piece, bloop, drop in. And then it was just like, everything opened up for me. And then I started to meet other people like and connect with beautiful like soul aligned friends and my partner, and just like everything just expanded and grew from there. But it's a challenging question to answer. As we circle back to it, like how do we love ourselves during those tough times? I think it's just like knowing that like moving through it is self-love, and it is deepening your love for yourself. So even though you're screaming and punching your bed, you are building self-love if you don't have that foundation of it just yet. Like it's through those moments of moving through. I hope that made sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think what's really coming to me, or like the way that I'm interpreting what you've been sharing, is self-love was built for you through saving yourself, through consistently being there for yourself. Like, I'm sure that there were moments when you abandoned yourself, because when we go through hard times, I think that's a part of that. Like, we don't always want to be with ourselves in that moment, but it also sounds like you kept showing up for yourself. Like you said, like you kept pulling yourself out. You kept pulling yourself out. I mean, that is building love, even when you do that, like in relationship with other people, when you're in romantic partnership and you go through difficult times, those difficult times can either separate you or they make it strong, they make your bond stronger and stronger because you keep showing up and you keep doing the work and you keep moving through that together. And so it makes complete sense to me that it sounds to me like that's exactly what you were doing, and that's really powerful. I think that's really helpful to see in regard, like me sitting here and listening to it. It feels so like not obvious, but it feels so like, of course, when we save ourselves, when we show up for ourselves, because we live in this world that and we grow up with this idea that we're going to be saved, whether we grow up in organized religion or not. I think it like permeates kind of everything, that like there's something else out there, some person, something that's going to like pick us up and take care of us, instead of realizing that it's us. And so, you know, those little quotes out there, like, you are the person that is going to save you or whatever.
Mm-hmm. I know
But
they're
I,
so cheesy, but they're
so
so,
true.
so true. And sometimes it's like the cheesiest, like shortest phrases that we've heard like 100 times, like that eventually just click and you're like, oh yeah, that is right. I love there's a lot of like, I guess, problematic things with this company, but I love Nike's slogan, just do it. Like when that clicked for me, it was like, oh yeah, you just do the thing. And then that is what progresses you forward. Whatever it is that you need to do, just do it. And you know what it is in your heart. So I love like cheesy little slogans because I love when like the cheesiest ones that you kind of hate the most or that you've seen so many times just eventually just like click and you're like, oh yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the those are usually the most powerful ones. But that's, I was just having this discussion with the Akashic Records about, because especially in the course, like there were many times that they were like repeating the same information. And I was like, what's going on? And they're like, we are repeating it because you do not get it the first time. We are repeating it because
Mhm.
these are the most important things for you to hear. So you may see this quote like a million times until it actually clicks. But I love your story because I think it really helps to anchor it in to something that is very, very real life and very serious. Because, going through difficult times, whether it is a spiritual emergency, as you call it, maybe losing, like someone passes away that you're really close to, some of these really big life events that like really switch our trajectory are so impactful in our life. You touched on real quick negative self-talk, and I'd love to hear just some of the strategies that you use to combat self um, negative talk.
Mhm.
My brain just went blank there for a second.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tricky and with anything like our we are all quite lazy, as activating as that might sound for some of us, but we like to do things that are comfortable and easy, and our minds love that too. It is challenging to create new neural pathways in our brains, but the only way we can do it is by doing the new thing over and over and over again. So for negative self-talk, it's all about reframing what we're saying to ourselves. And first, that starts by checking in and noticing that we are beating ourselves up in our own minds. And once we can see that there's this dialogue happening within our thoughts, within our minds that is negative, um, and beating ourselves up in one way or another, if that's like you're not good enough or you should have done better or um, anything like that, once we can identify the thought, then we can, or start to notice that we're having the thought. Then what I like to do is create a character. So call it our inner saboteur, which I stole from RuPaul, who I think got it from someone else. But I love the inner saboteur and just like naming it. Just name that inner saboteur, the thing, those thoughts that are saying the mean things to you. Um, Give it a name. And then whenever it does that, whenever it comes in, whenever it's like, oh my God, Susie, like, you know, you are in this line of work and you can't even like heal yourself right now. Like, what's wrong with you? Like, just be like, okay, I see that that is like my inner saboteur speaking again. Okay, like just name it and just be like, okay, like you're that thing. doing that thing again. And the moment you can, I find separating yourself from it makes it a lot easier to deal with. So it's saying that, and then all you have to do is counter it, almost as if you're having a conversation with your inner saboteur, and just tell it, like, yes, I am a healer and I am going to be able to heal myself through this. I just need to figure out the right way right now, and then move on that way. So cognitive reframing is what it's called. And we must first identify the thought, or what we're saying to ourselves, then replace it with a new thought. So, and a positive thought. And I find having that character of the inner saboteur as something to like counteract with, because it is coming in, even though it is you. You then counteract that. And then you repeat that to yourself, like, I am healing myself. I can heal myself. I am a healer. I can work through what I'm going through right now. And I am going to find the tools that are going to support me in this moment. Yeah,
I love
that's
that.
kind of like the quickest way. I think sometimes, like what I mentioned before, going back to like core memories and seeing like where that thought came from the first place. Often it's, you know, something someone said in the playground when we were a kid, or a parent, or something we saw on TV, or an experience that we had, and then they kind of stuck, and now it's just playing on loop. So every time something happens that's similar to that, we're saying those same things to ourselves. So, you know, if we like, even something as like silly or small as like tripping and falling, and then like calling yourself like a stupid idiot, like, which is so harsh to like think about. And I used to do it all the time. And now I just don't, because I've put this into practice so much. So, like, when I'm doing something like small, like tripping and falling, you know, instead of having that thought comes in, or if you're in the space where those thoughts are still coming in when you trip and fall, just tell yourself, like, no, like, inner saboteur, I am not a stupid idiot. I tripped because, you know, the sidewalk was uneven and I fell, and now I'm actually quite hurt. So what I'm going to do is pick myself up and like get a band-aid and move on, and just do those little things. Or like, you drop a glass, like whatever it is, like notice how you speak to yourself in those small ways, because every time you're doing that, you're reinforcing that self-hatred. And I know that sounds a bit extreme, but it is self-hatred. It's the complete opposite of self-love. um, Another thing that I like to do with clients is kind of have them ask themselves like a simple question of, like, what would someone who loves themselves do? And I borrowed this from Teal Swan. And it is such a simple question, but in each and every moment when we're feeling stuck or we're unsure of like where to go next, like taking a moment to pause, listen to your heart, um, and ask yourself, like, what would someone who loves themselves do in this moment? So if you're feeling really, really sad and you forgot to make that list of things that help you when you're sad, and or you lost it, you can just go into your heart, breathe, take a few breaths, feel into your heart, and keep on asking yourself, what would someone who loves themselves do? Pause and listen and see what arises. If nothing arises, ask yourself again, what would someone who loves themselves do? And wait and see what comes through for you. And then just do it. Take action right away, whatever it is. Even if it seems something like, oh, like, I don't know if I could do that right now. Like, if you do it, again, that is like the thing that is creating that self love. When we listen to our hearts and we take action on what our hearts want, that is gold. That is pure loving gold.
Yeah. It's also rewriting those like neural pathways too,
Mm-hmm.
because we're pushing back on, again, it's like the difference between letting our mind lead versus our heart lead. So when we push back on
Mm-hmm.
like not allowing the mind to lead, then that's recreating something complete, like different energy within our body. It's so powerful.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. Yeah, that's really beautiful. That's a really solid practice, I think. It kind of, I mean, like, I think it's really helpful too to like because it takes you out of the equation almost, you know, because you're not
Mm-hmm.
requiring yourself like, okay, come up with a solution, which in an activated moment, that can be really hard to access, you know, if you're feeling very emotional and like all of those different things. That's so huge. So I love talking with you, Susie. I feel like we could just continue talking all afternoon. But I'd like to wrap up with you sharing, you know, with everyone. Just I know you have a beautiful program. I know you do a number of different things. If folks are lucky enough to be up in Canada where you are, then they can actually like come hang out with you live. So if you would share with us um, you know, about your program and then just any way folks can work with you and where they can find you online.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can find me at my website, which is susesilva.com. Susie spelled Suse. And Instagram, and I have a newsletter too. If you want to sign up for that, you can access it through my Instagram or website. My main program that I absolutely love, and it's been like the most rewarding thing that I have done, and it's fairly new. It started around last spring. The idea dropped in. Spirit was like, okay, show people the way. And I'm like, what? What do you mean? It's like, okay, you're at the place now. Like, show people what you did to heal yourself, show them the way. And I just like kept on getting it like over and over again. I was like, nope, like, I'm not a psychotherapist. Like, how am I going to support people's mental health? Like, I don't like, no, this isn't for me. I'm not ready. I'm not going to do it. And it just kept on knocking. And you know, I aligned with a business coach kind of like fell into my lap essentially and started working with her. So that built the foundation for um, my business in general, but this program specifically. And everything was just channeled through so effortlessly. And it is a beautiful course. So, or program, mentorship, so many names you could call it, but it's a 3-month mentorship program called No More Mind Games. And that is really the foundation of it. We're trying to clear the mind games that we keep on playing with ourselves. And how this works is we meet once a week. The sessions are 2 hours in length, and it can be done online or in person in this beautiful space that I have here, if you're watching this. Um, and in each session, there is a workbook that's part of the program. I call it soul work, but they're activities or exercises or assignments that I give you for the times between our sessions. So you're doing things on your own. And then at each session, we check in, see how your week is, check in with the soul work, your progress with that. And then we do a physical practice. And by physical, it's not necessarily moving the body. Sometimes it is movement. Or it could be breath work or a visualization meditation or sound healing or energy healing or uh, forest bathing. And it's a very co-created healing program. So based on where you're at that day, I will intuitively decide what we're going to be doing after our conversation. So the majority of it is moving the energies in the body through somatic practices and various healing modalities. And it is so potent and so beautiful. Each week there's a different theme. So navigating negative self-talk, we get into right away. That's one of the themes. We do forgiveness practices, gratitude, ancestral healing, inner child work, future self work. And then by the end of the program, through all of the practices, through everything that you learned, you design your own roadmap for how to continue your healing journey afterwards. And then you always have the option to kind of book one-off sessions with me as needed. And really, it is just building the foundation. So I took everything from my own life experiences, the big ahas, those like moments that clicked for me. And that is what inspired this program. So it really is it's a lot of work. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's a lot of work. But the people who have come to my program, who have worked with me and who have put in the work are just living the most beautiful lives. And it is so beautiful to witness. I end up becoming friends with all of my clients, which has been a really nice surprise. I didn't know that was going to happen in doing this work, but everyone I end up like being um, best friends with. I mean, it doesn't necessarily always happen where we're talking all the time, but a lot of them, yes, we are friends and checking in with each other and just seeing how they are taking these very practical day-to-day tools and implementing them into their lives and how that is shifting in their relationships, first with themselves and then with their intimate partnerships, their family, their friends, their coworkers, how they feel towards their jobs, um, or how they're navigating maybe starting a new business and things like that, and feeling again well resourced in order to make big life shifts and changes. And everyone has a different experience going through the program because we're all so unique. So sometimes it's people coming to me who have gone through what I've gone through, who have experienced mania or spiritual emergency and then got hospitalized and then very traumatized from the experience of being institutionalized, which is a whole other podcast discussion. But often it's like healing that trauma and then, you know, first and then moving forward. A lot of it is trauma release work. And yeah, and then other people, they come to me because they're just like, I'm a 65-year-old woman. I have no idea what I'm doing in my life right now. Like it felt like I had shit figured out, but all of a sudden it feels like my world is falling and closing in on itself. And I feel like I have no path ahead. I don't know where I'm going. I don't know where I was. Everything's a blur. And how can I move forward? So, yeah, some people have a mental health diagnosis that they're navigating, or it's just someone that really wants to clear clear themselves, clear the trauma that they've experienced, look at themselves, integrate, and move on, feeling cleared and connected. So great program. I offer workshops and retreats as well, in person, and sometimes the workshops are online. Sometimes the retreats are online too. It kind of depends on the season. And yeah, those are ways you can connect with me.
Awesome. 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 Well, thank you so much, Suse, for sharing your wisdom and your time and just for being here and hanging out with me. I would love to have you back sometime and definitely want to like keep in contact. So thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it.
Oh my God, thank you so much, Anna. It has been so much fun reconnecting with you and chatting with you. And I love this podcast so much. So it's such a gift to be here with you. So thank you for your time and for allowing me to share my story.
Yeah, absolutely. We're honored to have you.
Hmm.
All right, folks, thank you so much for being with us today and sharing your time. Please be sure to share this share this episode with anyone who may benefit from it. Please leave us a review on iTunes or Spotify. Sign up for the email list for additional resources, podcast updates, whole nine yards. Sending you all so much love and gratitude. Thank you. Thank you. And don't forget, when we invest in ourselves, the world benefits. Until next time.